What's up, everyone? Welcome to my mind's eye. Hope your evening is going well. In this video clip, I'm going to be taking a look at a segment from the Joe Rogan podcast. He's speaking with a gentleman named Colion Norwa or Colin? Colion? Colion Norwa. Sounds like a real fancy wine from France or Italy. I'm not really sure how he pronounces his name, but I'm just going to call him Colion. I've seen a few clips with this guy. I don't know too much about him other than he is a advocate for the Second Amendment and possibly goes around the country teaching about gun laws and how to handle firearms properly. And maybe he did some stuff with the NRA. I'm not entirely sure, but we shall see. And this is called Gun Laws and Gun Crime Statistics. Now, I also chose this video because this is a really hot topic in this country right now with the unfortunate tragedy in Uvalde. And it's one of, a handful of mass shootings that have happened over the last couple dozen years. And personally, I am a supporter of the Second Amendment, and I am a gun owner. And I'm a recent gun owner. I haven't always been a gun owner. But I love history, especially ancient history. But I do know that the Second Amendment was put into the Constitution here in the United States as a means for citizens to protect themselves as well as fighting back against a government that could go tyrannical. And that's what the founding fathers were doing when they were fighting Britain for their independence. And you fast forward a little bit, there's no shortage of examples in the 20th century of governments that go tyrannical. And that could always be a possibility here in the United States, should the right people, or should I say wrong people, come to power, and that is always a concern. So I do support the Second Amendment. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a conversation to be had about improving gun laws or the requirements to get a gun. I think there should be better screening, and I don't know how to go about that because this isn't my area of expertise, or I'm not incredibly knowledgeable on gun policy. But I feel like there could be some improvement for screening, whether it's psych evaluations or what have you, above and beyond what we have now to give, okay people to purchase firearms. And when I say I'm a recent gun owner, like the last year and a half, I purchased 2 defense pistols, or they're called striker defense pistols, basically for defense or home defense. I got 2 Walther PPQ M2 9mm for my girlfriend and I. And that was after we moved to the state where I'm at now. Where I moved from was California, and I was living in Los Angeles. And it's extremely difficult to get a gun there. For just, say, an average citizen like me that can pass a background check, all the hoops you have to jump through to be able to get a firearm in California makes it almost impossible for you to get one. Yet people still have guns. So I don't know how I don't know how they got those weapons, whether they brought them in for other states or had them smuggled in or bought them on the black market or stole it from somebody or what have you. But there's plenty of firearms in California. And I know over the years they've made it tougher and tougher for you to be able to purchase one. So seeing all the riots back in, 2019 to and seeing a lot of it happen in Los Angeles and big cities across the country. And, I don't know if it was a justified fear of mine, but it seemed like things were just continuously getting worse and progressively getting worse. And I didn't know if there was going to be any end in sight. If really, to me, with everything that was going on in LA and seeing what's going around the country, it just felt like everything was crumbling. And we would find ourselves in some kind of dystopian Mad Max future. So when I moved to the state where I'm at now, that was one of the things I wanted to do first, was purchase firearms for my girlfriend and I so that we could defend ourselves if things got crazy where we moved to. And so that's where I'm at right now. And now, being a recent firearm owner, it's not my first experience with firearms. I've been around firearms since I was a kid. My stepdad had a couple shotguns, or at least one shotgun, I believe. But we did turkey shoots and things like that a few times. And I had friends whose parents had firearms and other people I knew that had firearms. So I was taught properly how to respect firearms and how to handle them and how they should be used in scenarios. And so I've always had that outlook for weapons like handguns and rifles and things like that. Now, outside, hopefully we learn something educational here. I mean, outside of gun laws and crime, or in addition to gun laws and crime statistics, but it should be interesting to hear what Joe and Coline are talking about. So let's begin.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
And so in that situation, and I'm probably kind of giving away too much information because the video's not out yet, but I think it's necessary. So the guy walks in, he says he's robbing the place. He hadn't shot anyone yet, but he starts arguing with another person. And the other guy's supposed to be like a new concealed carrier. And then the guy stands up, he's like, yo, what is your problem? What are you doing? And he's kind of angling towards his gun, but he hasn't gone for it yet. The other guy has a gun too, the guy who came in to rob the place, but he hasn't pointed his gun at anyone, he hasn't shot anyone. So at that point, theoretically speaking, you could argue that's just mutual combat.
Yeah.
Right? So which one can I shoot? Who's actually endangering who?
Right.
Right? So I ended up shooting the guy who came to rob the place. The problem is I shot him in the back too.
Ooh.
But that was from the standpoint of when I decided to shoot, I know how to shoot. So I dropped 4 or 5 rounds just naturally into the guy. He's like, oh shit, he turns around because he's getting shocked as I'm shooting him. So he turns to run.
So is it like a laser that sets off like a haptic feedback?
Yeah, so you're wearing a vest, right? It's called a stress vest. So you're wearing a stress vest, and so it sends out a laser every time you hit that person, and it shocks you.
And does it shock you like a taser? Does it shock?
It's as bad as you want it to be.
Really? So you can get it to the point where it immobilizes your body?
I don't think it gets that high. I think it gets to the point where you're like, okay, get this thing off me.
Have you ever been tased?
No.
I haven't either,
Yeah.
but I've watched people get tased, and I'm curious.
I'm not.
Because some people can just fucking handle it,
They
man.
can't. But aren't they usually high?
I don't know.
And I've watched people get tased too, not in real life, but in videos. And yeah, some people can handle it, and other people just fall over like a tree trunk or a tree being chopped down. It's timber, and they hit the ground and start shaking, and it's really crazy to watch. Now it sounds like in this scenario that maybe Coline was at some sort of training facility or something where they enact out scenarios, because he said the guy that he was shooting had the vest, and it was shocking him. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm hearing this wrong. Or maybe when he shot the guy who had a vest, he was getting shocked. But all I do know is when you're in these scenarios and your life is potentially on the line, because somebody says they're going to rob you, they're typically there with a weapon. They're not there with, fist and feet ready to karate chop the guy behind the counter or anybody else in the store. They're there with a bat or some, sharp knife or machete or pistol, a rifle, fully automatic submachine gun, who knows, a grenade. But when somebody says they're there to rob the place, you have literally split seconds by the time they actually decide to pull out that weapon to, you pull out your weapon if you have a concealed carry like Code Lion does to react and take out that guy before you or anybody else potentially loses their life. And that's how you train at the firing range, or when you do these role play scenarios, is you shoot to kill, or at least mortally wound. And all these people that are like, oh, why don't you just shoot him in the legs or shoot him in the foot? This isn't an action movie. If you've never shot weapons like that before, you have no idea what it takes to be that accurate. Not only just to shoot a leg or a foot standing still, but to hit somebody that's walking and potentially running. So how they train people is to shoot for the biggest target and shoot center mass, whether that's in their chest or in their back. But the vest thing's pretty cool. And if they had something like that where you could wear, and if you ever get into one of these situations to, and if you are shooting somebody that maybe it sends you a little jolt so you don't go overboard, just do what you need to suppress the person or immobilize them, as opposed to just emptying clip after clip or full clips. That'd be pretty cool. But let's rewind here a few seconds and continue.
Fucking handle it,
They
man.
can't. But aren't they usually high?
I don't know. It's a good question.
I think sometimes they're high.
But how does that stop your body from shutting off due to the electricity?
That is true. That I don't know.
Because I've seen people just get zapped and they just stand there
Yeah,
and
like
they just
nothing.
pull
And
the
just pull
shit right out of the body.
Now, I did see this one video guy did that. The cop was being very patient with the guy. And he zapped him and he nothing. And he's like, all right. And he zapped him again. He dropped.
Really?
So,
Second time he dropped.
So I don't know what part,
Yeah.
I don't understand. That's outside of my wheelhouse, honestly.
My friend Dana White, he went for one of his shows. They all got tasered, and they fell like their body just shut off. Like they just fell over.
See, I'm not. The funny thing about it is I had the stress vest on too. So when I was doing it, so the whole time I'm like, I don't want to experience this.
Yeah. Fuck
So
that.
yeah.
So if he
kinda-
hit you, he turned and hit. Yeah.
Yeah, screw that. I don't want to get shocked.
Yeah. I'm curious of what that's like. I'm sure it's horrible.
I mean, I'll put it like this: when I shot him, he yelled. So I'm assuming it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But from that perspective, I still ended up shooting him in the back.
Now is that legal? Because you are not in danger. You're just acting almost like as law enforcement or as protection.
So in that particular case, once we broke it down, my shooting was justified, right? But it just goes to show you how thin that line is between justified and unjustified.
And doesn't it also in that situation, was there cameras involved?
Yeah.
Because it's in a store.
Yeah.
But what if you're in a school, like in a school situation? Like if you walked in and shot that guy who was killing those kids and you shot him in the back, clearly you'd be justified.
Yeah, you'd be justified
right?
at that because that's in defense of a third party.
Okay.
Right. So at that point, all bets are off. Like whether I shoot you in the back, front, side. But I guess the argument that could be made in my particular situation is he was retreating.
Right.
Right, because he was running out. That's why I shot him, because he turned to run away. And so it was basically, and it happens really quickly.
Right.
And the split times between my trigger pull are pretty fast. So it's like bang, 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 bang. And,
Right.
That time period, he can turn and catch
Yeah.
one in the back. But
Yeah, it's split
you get an
seconds.
aggressive enough prosecutor, that's the argument they made. If I was a prosecutor, that's the argument I would make.
You know about
And you also don't know, like, if somebody runs away like that, yeah, you shot him in the back, but you don't know, like, if you don't shoot, you don't know if that guy's just going to duck outside real quick and then pop back in and start blasting. Like, you have no idea. Like, like I said, when your life is on the line like that, or people around you's life's on the line like that, you have seconds, and you have no idea how quickly that happens unless you're in that situation. I remember when I was 16, my first job was at McDonald's, and I got it because it was close to my house. But we got held up. I worked the night shift, and we got held up. Some guy was hiding, I think, where you put the trash cans. So we would pull the trash cans out from where they, it's got the little door and the lid that goes in, and we pulled the trash cans out to change the bags. Well, he was hiding inside. He snuck in and hid inside where the can usually goes. And while we were breaking down the back area, he just held us up, shoved us all into the freezer. And it happened so quick, and we didn't know if we were going to die or not. It was pretty scary. He eventually just shoved us all into the freezer, but I remember a couple of the girls that were the same age as me, they ended up quitting because they were so traumatized or stressed out by it. They didn't want to take the chance of that happening again. So, it's scary, and if you haven't been in that position, it's hard to understand how quickly all that happens.
An aggressive enough prosecutor, that's the argument they made. If I was a prosecutor, that's the argument I would make.
You know about the case in Austin where a guy was not charged for a long period of time, but it was at one of the protests during the pandemic, and this guy apparently was military. And he was an Uber driver. He was Uber driving.
I do remember that. Yeah.
So he pulled down this road. I think he was following his GPS, and he pulled down this road, and all of a sudden he's faced with the people that were blocking the road.
Yeah.
And this guy pulls an AK-47 out and points it at him.
Yeah.
And
he shoots him.
He's a veteran.
Yeah.
I mean, he's used to being in live combat situations, and he just pulls out his gun
And shoots him.
and shoots him.
Yeah. Did he get charged?
He did get charged.
Did he get convicted?
I don't know.
Okay, 'cause I can't
Let's find
remember
out what the status on that was, because all of my friends that are law enforcement or military were furious that he got charged, because this guy literally pointed the gun at his face.
Yeah.
Like he's standing there
I'd shot
pointing
him.
the gun. What are you going to do? It's like, how do you know if the guy's going to kill you or not?
Right.
Like, it's unreasonable to point a gun at a person in that scenario.
But you know what
Right.
you know what that speaks to?
What?
Education.
Education.
Right. And so, like, real quick, too, I just want to point out, like, it's an AK-47. If it's a real one, it's a fully automatic machine gun. And that guy could empty a clip of 30 rounds or whatever it holds in seconds. So if somebody's pointing something like that at you, you have no idea, unless it's got an orange tip on the end of the barrel, like, you have no idea if that thing's a replica, a toy, a converted pistol to look like an AK-47, or like, you just don't know. And if you got somebody pointing that, it's either you or him. If I have a firearm, like a concealed carry or an open carry, like this veteran did, and somebody does that, and you've been trained to do combat, I'm instinctually going to try to take you out before you take me out. I can't ask questions or hope that you're playing around, or maybe you're thinking about it, or got a shy trigger finger. Like, and the fact that he got charged for that, charge is one thing, but actually getting convicted of murder is another. And if you got convicted of murder, I mean, it's insane to me.
Scenario.
But you know what that speaks to?
What?
Education.
Education.
Yeah.
Dude, like I in my videos, I say this time and time again. We have over 400 million guns in this country, man. You're not getting away from the guns.
Right.
You're not.
And if you take them away from legal people that have them legally,
The only people who are going to have them,
are the people that have them illegally.
Exactly. And so, if we understand that this is the country that we live in, we have a Second Amendment, we understand the culture in this country, why would we not spend just even a decent amount of resources on a federal level, and let's say local level, to teach people the dynamics involved with firearm ownership?
Exactly.
Let me ask you this. One of the people,
I mean, we do it for driver's ed, right? They spend resources to teach people how to drive. They need to teach people responsible gun ownership and the handling of a firearm, so that you're not accidentally shooting yourself or other people, or doing something that's going to be a misuse of the weapon, because you're not getting away from the guns in this country. Not at this point. Like you said, 400 million guns in this country.
Dynamics involved with firearm ownership.
Let me ask you this. One of the things about people that are pro Second Amendment is they don't want to change any of the restrictions or the way it's set up right now. They want to keep it exactly the way it is in terms of what kind of background checks exist. And they don't want to add any sort of additional checks, any sort of additional restrictions. Why is it so easy to get a gun license?
Because efficiency.
But why is it so hard to get a driver's license?
Because people suck at driving.
But don't people suck at shooting?
Some do. A lot of people do.
A lot of people
Yeah.
do.
The difference,
right?
though, too, is we're talking about a constitutional right versus a privilege.
Yeah,
When I
that's the
got a
distinction.
concealed carry permit, I had to go through an extensive examination, which also involved showing that you are proficient at shooting. Why don't people have to do that?
Well, because we are talking about a constitutional right.
Right.
So the standard is a lot different than, say, okay, we're giving you the privilege to drive this car on the road. So like with the car, I can own any car I want. If I have private property, I can drive all over that private property without any education, without any instruction or any of that stuff. Now, the moment I want to step out into the public with this car and drive it on public roads, that's when I have to get licensed, get registration, and all of those things.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So
Just kind of cut in here real quick is I think actually that should, since gun ownership is a right, I think as long as you keep it at your home on your property, then you shouldn't have to do any training. I mean, it's probably more beneficial that you do, but you shouldn't have to do any training. Now, if you want to bring that gun out onto the streets, or like the analogy that Colion's talking about with bringing the car onto the actual public streets, you need a driver's license. You got to pass the test, written in the actual driving test. I think maybe we should have something like that with what Joe's talking about, where they need to go through all kinds of training like he did for his concealed carry, and make sure that you're proficient at shooting and that you understand your responsibility as a gun owner. And that's in addition to the stuff that I've already think is a big underlying cause of like these mass shootings and suicides by gun, whatever the numbers are for that, is the mental health crisis in this country.
That's when I have to get licensed, get registration, and all of those things.
okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to have a gun and they want to take it somewhere, then they have to go through these examinations.
Generally speaking. So like
but not
that
here.
used to be the case in Texas. Now, no. Now we have constitutional carry, which means that you don't have to go through those procedures in order to carry a firearm.
So here's the story. Uber also released a statement. Unfortunately, we aren't able to comment on pending litigation. This is about the guy who's an Uber driver. As we've released in the past, this incident is not related to the Uber platform. It says for now, this gentleman, Perry, remains indicted on multiple charges, including murder in this case.
Wow.
In August, his attempt to get the murder charge dropped was denied. From what I understand, this is has to do with the district attorney in Austin. That they, we have a lot of very liberal district attorneys in this country. They just repealed the guy in San Francisco to screams and cheers of people who are dealing with unprecedented crime and homelessness there.
Don't get me started on San Francisco, bro.
Oh, you're the one who told me about it. You're the one who explained to me the whole homeless situation, and we've talked about it multiple times and credited you with explaining it. Since you're a lawyer and you understand
he's a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
like the inner workings of the machine in a way that I probably don't.
I'll be honest with you. You know what got me to understand it? It wasn't me being a lawyer. It was me being on the ground and seeing this shit and talking to the people. That's what really set it off for me. Because when I was with the NRA and we were doing these mini
with the NRA.
documentaries, going to these different places and talking to the people on the ground, they were explaining stuff to me. You can watch the video. You see it in my face. I'm like, the same way you reacted is the same way I reacted when I first heard it.
I thought it was a funding thing. I thought we need more money for homelessness. And then when I realized that it's a business, it's like a light bulb went off. When you explained it to me, I was like, of course. It's like everything else. When you showed me the numbers and the people in LA making $260,000 a year to deal with the homeless situation, and it's not going
Crazy.
anywhere, I'm like, that person has a fucking great job.
You know,
$260,000 a year. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. Now, I can tell you, just from living in LA, the homeless situation is out of control. It is terribly sad, and it's unfortunate. And there's actually a lot of those people that have mental health problems. Like, you'll see them sitting on a corner or somewhere just smacking their heads. It looks like they haven't showered in years. They're smacking the ground. They're screaming at the door. They're mad at the door or mad at the clouds, or and it's really terrible to see people in that state. But the homeless situation is out of control. I mean, there's something like 100,000 homeless people. No matter if you're in Santa Monica or Venice Beach, which are just littered with homeless people, Skid Row, which is downtown, and that is just a cesspool. And I mean, it's filthy. It's absolutely filthy. I think they found something like a couple years ago, they found traces of bubonic plague and typhus. And I think these are diseases that haven't been around in centuries, but because of the rats and the drug and the needles and the filth, it started popping up down there. And I don't know what they did to deal with that, but I did hear about it in the news. And even where I lived in North Hollywood off of Lancashire and Victory, when I first moved there, it was, pretty decent. It was not a high-end area of Los Angeles, but it was pretty decent in terms of its appearance. By the time I left there, I mean, you're talking tent city, shanty towns, all lining the streets, trash everywhere. And the laws are such that the police can't even do nothing. If they moved even what to me appears to be garbage, like that's considered personal property. And the police will get in trouble for that. Their hands are basically tied behind their back. And San Francisco, it's really sad what's happened to that city as well, because of the policies that are in place by that government. And the homeless situation is crazy there. You got, homeless guys pooping in the fountains at business parks, and you got people also stealing from stores, Walgreens or CVS, where they can just go in there with the trash bag and steal, like $800 worth of stuff, and the people are just going to watch them and let them go right out. It's crazy. It's really insane what's happened to that state, even more than how insane people already thought it was. And that's one of the reasons why I left. It just, for me, it wasn't livable. I wanted to be in a place with a little bit more sanity and freedom to live my life.
Situation, and it's not going anywhere. I'm like, that person has a fucking great job.
I actually analogize that to the issue with gun violence in the inner city.
How so?
So, it's a theory. Do I have concrete data to affirm it? Nope. But I think to a degree, a lot of these leaders and politicians in the inner city need that violence in the inner city to continue as a way to justify the necessity for them being in the positions that they're in.
Like, what kind of positions?
So, if you think about it, the vast majority of the gun violence in this country is from the inner city. Like, overwhelmingly so.
The numbers are crazy. Like, when people talk about gun violence in this country, maybe we should start with that, right? Mm-hmm. Gun violence in this country, when you look at gun deaths, a gigantic percentage of them are suicides.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say about 65%, 63 to 65% are suicides.
Okay. So when we're talking about gun violence, I mean, I'm not in favor of suicide.
Yeah.
Obviously I want people to get help and live happy lives. But this is not my main concern. My main concern is people harming other people.
Yeah.
So,
and that's where I got to push back a little bit on Joe there. I mean, it should be a concern because it's a mental health issue, the suicides. And that also is a correlation with the people that do the mass shooting. When you find out they had all these issues, it's a mental health issue that caused them to lose their shit and go out there and slaughter a bunch of people. So it goes back to what I was saying about the mental health crisis in this country. So it should be a concern of Joe's. It should be a concern of everybody because that is a prescriptive underlying issue that leads to the bigger issues.
When we look at my main concern is people harming other people.
Yeah.
So when we look
That's
at the
that's
numbers
also a
of gun
concern.
violence, it's always exaggerated because they don't include the fact that that is a
They're starting to
number.
do it now. They did it before.
How do you hear about it on Fox News?
Yeah, like they legit. I remember because this was like at the genesis kind of my 2A advocacy when I was looking at the numbers because I kind of initially just took the numbers for what they were, and I just assumed because you hear gun violence, you hear gun deaths, you're thinking people shooting at other people in the middle of the street and dropping dead, right?
It's like the Wild West.
And then I started looking into the numbers, and I started realizing, wait, 63 to 65% are suicides. And like I point out, it's not that I don't care about suicides, but then I also backdoored and I said, okay, well, let's look at the suicide rate just as a whole in America versus other places that have strict gun laws. And I remember when I was on Bill Maher and I was sitting at the round table, we kind of started getting into that discussion. And you would think, considering we have as many guns as we have in this country in the hands of civilians, you'd think on the surface we'd lead the world in suicides. We don't. Not even close.
It's probably Japan.
So that stands to reason that the issue with suicides isn't a gun thing. It is purely a mental health thing,
Yes.
right? So that's why I'm able to, okay, let's set this aside and now deal with what's remaining. Then you have a very small percentage that are accidental gun deaths, right? We're talking about like maybe totality in a year, 1,000.
And what percentage is that
That,
about?
I think it's like, if I remember correctly, it's like 3 to 5%
Okay.
or something like that.
So
And-
we're almost at 70% then.
Yeah.
We're at like 68.
And that's including,
somewhere.
and then there's another percentage that includes officer shootings, whether it's officer shooting a criminal or a criminal killing an officer, right? So we can put that here over here as well because that's a
how
different
many,
dynamic.
What percentage are officers shooting?
That's sitting somewhere in about the also 2 to 3%. I'm probably flipping it. I don't know if the accidental gun deaths are about 2 to 3 and the officers like 5, if I'm not mistaken. But
we could find out.
Yeah.
Jamie will pull it up so we could get an accurate assessment of it.
But to get to where we want to go is essentially homicides with firearms. That's
Right.
where we want to be. And generally speaking, you got a range of about 8 to 12,000 people every year die from actually being shot by another person. That includes mass shootings, everything.
Right. And then what percentage of
number.
those are gang related?
So, because the whole gang related, because now what's happening is they're taking a lot of the gang related shootings and including them in mass shootings. It's just kind of like what happened in Philadelphia recently,
I
right?
see what you're saying.
They called the Philadelphia shooting that just happened recently a mass shooting.
What was the Philadelphia one?
It was basically there was a shootout between I don't know how many people it was, but there was like I can't remember exactly where in Philly it was, but essentially I can't remember. A lot of people got shot, and they called it a mass shooting. It was street violence. That's what it was. It was
yeah.
two parties going at it.
And I think that's really where we have to understand the numbers. We need to understand the differences, the distinctions between the different types. Sure, they all may be shootings, but a suicide is not the same as a homicide. And a homicide is not the same as self-defense. And I think this is very important in terms of understanding the numbers, the pie chart, and understanding those distinctions so we can address each individual one. And it pisses me off when people conflate purposefully what something is, like two gangs going at it and they're killing each other, with a single person that's got mental health issues that takes it upon himself to go in and slaughter a bunch of people. They're not the same thing, other than people got shot and died. And so I think, the people that conflate those issues in order to push their political agenda, to me, it's I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but it's not good. And so I hate when people do that, because to me it's like it's a sense of, it makes me sense like they're being dishonest in order to push their ideological position. No, I don't care whose side you're on.
Mass shooting. It was street violence. That's what it was. It was two parties going at it, and they called it mass shooting. I guess you could argue why that's considered a mass shooting, but it's not. But in our minds, when we think about it, a mass shooting is somebody, you have an individual or multiple people who want to go and kill as many innocent people as possible. Right. We're not talking about people who are shooting each other over disputes. This was a dispute that took place in the public between two people with guns, essentially. And so they want to call that a mass shooting. And I'm like, that's not fair, because the way to deal with these types of things there's different. The same way you don't include the suicides and the homicides, because there are different reasons for why they're happening, right? And so a lot of the vast majority of the gun violence, the homicide aspect of it, is from the inner cities. That's where it's coming from. It's these kids, literally, when I say kids, I'm talking like 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. They're shooting at each other. Now, I'm not dismissing that and saying that it's irrelevant and that we shouldn't factor that in. What I'm saying is it's a totally different reason for why it's happening. It's not a gun issue. It's a socioeconomic issue. Because if you take those same kids that look like me, right? I know a lot of black people or people of color who live in the suburbs of America, and they're not running around committing drive-bys in their BMWs.
Right.
They're not. So what's the difference there? They have access to guns the same way these kids have access to guns, and these kids have access to guns illegally in the inner city. The difference is prolonged exposure to poverty. But nobody wants to have that conversation. And the reason they don't want to have that conversation is because it is admittedly hard to deal with. It's hard. It's convoluted and it's difficult.
Especially when, like Joe was saying, people are making $260,000 off of the business of homelessness. And if they were to solve that issue, then there goes their nice six-figure job. And I think maybe that's another, in the same vein, a similar reason to why the poverty situation never gets fixed, because there's people making a lot of money, and if that goes away, then there goes their paycheck. And that's also like the race hustlers in this country that are always sowing division between, everybody. If things weren't always portrayed as horrible and cataclysmic for everybody that's not white, then, and keep us all fighting each other, then they're going to be out of business too. It's really sad. It's really, really sad. But I agree with Co-Lion that we need to understand the reasons and the distinctions. And I agree with some of the stuff Joe was saying too about being properly trained and having more stringent screening processes, maybe including a psych evaluation, and it's very unfortunate, all this stuff, but I think we just need to cut the crap and everybody needs, and I know this is so hard to do, but people need to shelve their political affiliation and ideology just for a second so that we can be just people talking to each other to try to solve this, because just putting more laws in place isn't going to fix, I think, the underlying problem, the prescriptive issue, which is the mental health problem in this country. But that's going to do it for this video. If you have anything you want to say on the gun laws or gun violence or this video, drop a comment down below. I'm going to put the link down to the original video in the description. And if you have any recommendations for something you'd like me to check out, react to, you can also put that in the comments. So that'll do it for this video. My name's Trevor, and this has been a glimpse into my mind's eye. Hope everybody enjoys the rest of their evening. Thanks for watching, stopping by, and hanging out. Take care. Have a blessed evening. Bye.